Hello everyone. Today's class is for Kolani University NEP third semester undergraduate English minor students. In this lecture, I would like to deal with the essay Recollections of Childhood by Richard Steele. The entire lecture will be divided into two segments. The first segment will deal with the emergence of periodical literature or magazine literature or essay or non-fiction prose in the 18th century. Whereas in the second section, I would like to deal with the text itself. Now, in the 18th century, club culture and the growth of journalism contributed to rise of periodical literature or the essay. In the late 17th and early 18th century, coffee drinking and club gossip became a popular urban fashion all over Europe. In London, coffee houses, particularly Wilson Bill's, popped up, adding flavor to the hobnob and club culture among the literary circles. It was, as Argyris puts it, in London coffee houses that the most famous early English periodicals were born, The Tatler and The Spectator. The growth and popularity of the essays in the 18th century is related to the publication of the periodicals. Originally, the essay meant a non-fiction prose work. Francis Bacon in his essays and Ben Jonson in his discoveries diverged from the Elizabethan patterns of prose writing. The melody, romance, and rhetorical flourish of the Elizabethan prose yielded to the precise, smooth, and planned prose style in Bacon particularly. Then the 17th century characters popularized by Sir Thomas Overbury marked the protean appearance of the essays. Out of the confluence of the essays of Bacon or Ben Jonson and the 17th century characters came the concept and practice of the essay. The essay developed further into an egotistical form of writing that contained the subjective meditation and reminiscence of the author. Thus, the periodical essay came up, culminating in the romantic essays of Hazlitt, De Quincey, and Charles Lamb in the 19th century. In the 18th century, another form of essay developed, the essay of literary criticism. John Dryden popularized this form through his essay of dramatic poesy. By definition, the essay is a subjective and flexible art of prose writing. A.C. Benson, in his The Art of the Essayist, says that anything under the sun can suffice to be the subject matter of the essay, because the essay exists by the charm of the essayist's personality. Dr. Johnson defines the essay as a loose sally of the mind, an irregular, indigested piece. It should be short, unmethodical, personal, and written in a style that is easy and elegant. During the Restoration period, besides Dryden's literary essays, we have Locke's essay concerning human understanding in 1690, Temple's essay on poetry in 1685. These two were written in elaborate and longish form, and the style in them was didactical. However, these essays are the true precursors of the modern essay. With the circulation of periodicals in the 18th century, the essay became varied, supple, and personal, coming close to the definition of A.C. Benson. The works of Addison and Steele through The Tatler and The Spectator marked a turning point. They carved a line along which the future essays would evolve. In their hands, the essay became the rival of drama. Other important essayists of the period were Swift and Pope. George Shenburne, in The Restoration and the 18th Century, says the periodical essay has been aptly described as dealing with morals and manners, but it might, in fact, deal with anything that pleased its author. It might be published independently of other materials, as was The Spectator, or it might be leading article in a newspaper. The shaping influence on the periodical essay came from journalism rather than the literary tradition of Montaigne, Bacon, or Cousty or Cowley. Therefore, George Shenburne correlated the essay to the magazine like The Spectator or the newspaper. The periodical or pamphlet in the form of a letter like Will's occasional papers popularized the form of the letter as an essay device. However, over this type of the essay was more popular the kind of periodical essay that Addison and Steele adopted. The Tatler started in April 1709 and the Spectator was born in March 1712. The Spectator was by far superior to any other periodicals of that time. It was a folio half sheet appearing daily. The Tatler came out on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, the days on which the postal carriage left London. These two periodicals undertook to banish vice and ignorance out of the territories of Great Britain. The political conflict between the Tories and the Whigs came to be reflected in the essays published by the two periodicals. However, the main concern of the essays was to instruct the public about morals and manners. The Spectator Club was formed. It initiated an era of talk and talkers. The political essay became popular through Defoe's The Review. It's a Whig organ and it brought out series of political essays against the Tory. The raillery between the two parties yielded other political periodicals like Edinburgh Mirror and The Examiner. Addison, unlike his contemporaries, saw that the exclusion of the political views could ensure larger circulation of the periodicals. So, Addison, without favoring any political party, went on publishing literary essays and essays of manners and morals through his The Spectator. Now, this was a very brief history of the emergence and development of the periodical essays in the 18th century. Now, in the second section of this lecture, I would like to move on to a brief discussion of the essay Recollections of Childhood by Richard Steele. Richard Steele, in his essay Recollections of Childhood, records the carefree graces of the recollection. He announces the effusions, the display of self, the ethics of sensibility which the 18th century has made popular. His essays are marked by a clarity of thought, and he possesses a certain faculty of composition and a gift of delicacy. In Recollections of Childhood, we find him critically turning over his memory and locating the different incidents of death that have jerked him periodically. The first death described by him is the death of his father, witnessed by him in his early childhood. At that time, he did not know the implication of death. I quote, I remember I went into the room where his body lay, and my mother sat weeping alone by it. I had my battledore in my hand, and fell a beating the coffin, and calling Papa, for I know not how I had some slight idea that he was locked up there. Unquote. Thus, even before knowing what death is, still faces it. And Judging from the responses of his mother, he is struck by the dignity and poise which even death cannot destroy. Death, the unknown factor still in his life, gives him a feeling of emotions that are finely tuned with it. He absorbs them and has thus made pity his chief virtue and chief weakness. By establishing his artistic sensibility that can be disturbed by every unnatural happening, Still passes on to discuss generally the nature and the character of death and the bereaved. He says that death relieves us of the burden of life, but we cannot accept this simple truth. I quote, thus we groan under life and bewail those who are relieved from it. Unquote. However, death is not always a storehouse of sadness. It can also bring glory. The lives which have been untimely severed by war and the likes, which have been laid down, and the lives which have been laid down for the country, lives which could otherwise have shown their talents elsewhere, moves us not to grieve for them, but to salute them for their selflessness and valor. Death has made them martyrs. They, through death, have world shown the world how casually this petty life can be sacrificed for national good. But Still's object is not to raise veneration, but to recall sad personal thoughts on death. In this connection, we can recall Shakespeare's sonnet number 30, where he muses on death. We can recall Macbeth, who describes life as nothing but a walking shadow. We can recall the context of the death of Lycidas in Milton's elegy Lycidas. Thus, Steele sentimentalizes over death and complains about the ruthlessness of fate that afflicts both the brave and the meek with equal intensity. O death, thou hast right to the bold, to the ambitious, to the high, and to the haughty. But why this cruelty to the humble, to the meek, to the undiscerning, to the thoughtless? Still says. He recalls the memory of his childhood lady friend whom he saw blossoming with joy and dead in a single death, sentimentalized and moistened with personal grief. Contrast the general discussion found in the preceding paragraph, where the cause of death has been cursed but death glorified. That Still here is not writing a diary is apparent from the beginning of the essay, which pans general mankind to bring out general traits of it. It divides the human race into two categories. On the one hand, we have those who let sight rule over their memory, and on the other hand, there are people who periodically think of those who are to be seen no more. Still finds himself in the second category. And paradoxically, he entertains himself by recalling the sad memories of his yesteryears. This memory is entertaining because after a long gap, they have loosed their stings of grief and can be dwelt upon normally. Unlike Shakespeare, who in Sonnet 30 weeps afresh for every past sorrow, still can only look at himself with disdain, since tears are not flowing down his cheeks, while he is recalling the memory of his dead friends and loved ones. The essay Recollections of Childhood is an example of personal essay, in which Steele takes up a subject that is personal but makes it general through his treatment of the subject. The personal emotions are found quite liberally in the essay when he dwells on the death of his father and lady friend. The incident of the death of his father, in which, not knowing what death means, he tries to persuade his father to come out and play with him, is moistened with sentiment. In the death of his lady friend, we find personal anguish. But the reason for calling up sad memories makes the personal memory general. I quote, with tempers too much given pleasure, it is almost necessary to revive the old places of grief in our memory and ponder step by step on past life to lead the mind into that sobriety of thought which poises the heart and makes it beat with due time without being quickened with desire or retarded with despair from its proper and equal emotion. Unquote. As in the case of other personal essays, Steele experiments with characters. But in this case, like Lamb, his character is he himself. A fertile mind, a generous personality, attractive even in its weakness, still draws to himself the sympathies of the readers.